Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. You guys have busy schedules, as do I today. First of all, thank you for taking the time out of your day to join me. I appreciate it. Hopefully this will be helpful to you as you start your planning process for quarter 4 or even for next year. This is really designed as something you can kick off right away. So you don't have to necessarily wait until 2021 to get it going. In fact, I would recommend you to take the time to practice it for the last 3 months of the year, because as you go through this, you'll learn why that's going to be important. Again, just some housekeeping things. If you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. I will respond to those at the end of the webinar. We should have some time left over to answer anything. Also have an offer for you as you go through this. If there is anything you need help with as you're filling out your own one-page plan, I am happy to help you do that. And I will give you a link where you can actually have a free half hour with me at the end to discuss that. So thank you again, and let's get the ball rolling. So first of all, I believe most of you know who I am, but just in case you don't, my name is Dan Paulson. I own Envision Development International, and for the past 16 or so years, I have been working with business owners much like yourself to find ways to improve their operations, to lead better, to create great cultures. And that's part of what we're doing here, because the planning process is really about establishing a lot of these elements in a process that is going to be continuous throughout the lifetime of your business, or as long as you're running it. So this is the first step in what will hopefully be many for you, as creating a living document for your business is really what's going to make the difference. So here's what we're going to cover today. I'm going to talk about the challenge of planning, which many of you have faced, including some of you that I've worked with in the past, so we probably faced them together. And hopefully this is a more refined process compared to when we were working together before. The benefits of planning, which again, if you're here, you probably already understand that, but we'll cover some of those as well. And then we'll go through the how-to. I will actually walk you through the document. Again, that link is in the chat. So if you have logged in recently and didn't see the connection there, go to the chat, click on the link. That will give you a PDF that you can type into. Personally, I would recommend, if you have the ability, print it off today, make notes on it, and use those notes to actually create the document later on. As we go through this, I'm going to be flying along, and really just, there won't be enough time for you to actually create the document as we go, nor will you have put in the thought you need to really create a good working business plan. So while the business plan is simple and efficient, it is still something that requires some thought, some research to make sure that you're doing the right things. And then lastly, we'll end up with questions. And again, if you have any questions, type them in the chat throughout this as we go along. I will answer the questions at the end. So let's get going. First of all, why do most business plans fail? If you have done a business plan in the past, you probably realize that it can be pretty complex. Now, there's business planning, there's strategic planning. I'm going to kind of blend the two here today, because really what you're doing is you're building strategies to grow your company. And many of you that are on the call have already established business. Some of you might be looking at a startup, but for the most part, you probably have something that's already up and running. So this is really about how you apply this process to creating an overall strategic plan that you can use with your team to really grow your organization in an effective way. Now, why do these fail? Primarily, what I see is most people create a static document. They invest a lot of time and energy on the front end, a lot of resources for that matter. To tell you a story there, I worked for a company prior to starting this, and we had a planning process that took place every year. It was approximately 3 to 3.5 months long. It involved virtually everybody at a management level in the organization. It was designed to really kind of lay out what the following year or 2 years was going to bring and who was going to be responsible for what. So it did a lot of the right things. However, the plan was never really touched much after the first of the year. It was used as review. It was used for primarily, did you do what you said you were going to do? And if that plan changed for any reason, again, the plan didn't change, but maybe the direction the company took did, then a lot of the objectives you were working on didn't change with it. So most documents that are created are flatline documents. You just do them, they're done. You're expected to work from them, and then what you find is much like the New Year's resolutions, after about 3 weeks or a month, they quit working because people quit working on them. A lot of plans are designed so they can't fail. Now, what do I mean by that? Most of us are too optimistic in what we think we can accomplish in any given year. And this is true for large organizations as well as solopreneurs like some of you out there, including myself. We think we can do a lot more than we can. What we don't often understand are all the interruptions that happen throughout the course of business and also all the changes. I think 2020 has been a good representation of, if it can go wrong, it probably will. And that is what we see here now. So if you created a plan at the end of 2019 that you were hoping that you were going to execute in 2020, by March, that plan probably got tossed in the garbage, because for most of us, that wasn't going to work out the way we had intended it. So we got to be really careful that as we design these plans, we make it nimble enough that we can move around. We also need to be realistic. It doesn't mean we don't set, large goals for ourselves, optimistic goals for ourselves, but we do need to make sure that what we're going to do, we have a reasonable chance of accomplishing in the course of that year. Not watching where your competitors are. Sometimes we get a little blind and we worry about ourselves and where we want to go, and we're not paying attention to what our competitors are doing. I've also seen the flip of that, where we worry too much about what our competitors are doing, and we play a game of follow along. We don't look for ways to maneuver around them or maneuver over them. Instead, we just kind of watch what they're doing, and if we see they're doing tends to work, we want to follow it. Well, the whole idea of creating a planning process is to really understand what your competitors are doing, and then being conscious of how you can maneuver around that, how you can do something better than what they do, because all businesses are different. Even if you sell the same products or services, ideally you have to find out what makes you unique. We'll talk a little bit about that later. Evolution or revolution. So plans. Are they about improving what you're doing, or are they about taking your company in a whole different direction? A lot of people assume that if you're doing a planning process, it's a major pivot that you're enacting. Now, for example, 2020, maybe that is something you need to do. Maybe the way you're doing business right now won't work. For example, restaurants. Restaurants are going to have a heck of a time if all they're doing is dine-in business. Many places don't even allow dine-in, or they allow dine-in at maybe 25 or 50% capacity. If you haven't figured out a way to sell products to your customers remotely right now, or through delivery or through pickup, whatever it might be, it's going to be really hard to keep the doors open. Restaurants, for example, need to look at the products they sell or the food that they sell, and does it transfer well? Sometimes what sits down and looks really good at you on the table in front of you doesn't look so good when it's traveled for 30 minutes in a styrofoam container. So you've got to be aware that some of the things that you're doing might be an improvement of what you're already doing, not a major shift. And you really have to figure out, when you do the plan, which is it going to be? In most cases, for most companies, what we should be looking at is, how do we improve the business we're already doing? We should be asking the questions, is that business going to be sustainable or viable over the next several years? If it's not, then what changes do we need to make incrementally, so that way, as what we were doing becomes obsolete, the new options available to us are something we're looking at tackling. Also, know your impact. Plans require resources. The biggest challenge, on top of having overly optimistic plans, is knowing who's going to help you put that plan together, who's going to help you take action on that plan, what resources you're going to need, talent, money, time, to actually put that plan to work. If you're unable to really lay that out, your plan's pretty much dead in the water, because you're going to attempt something. You're not going to have either the internal or external processes in place to actually implement it, or the resources to do so, and that's going to run into a lot of issues. Finally, plans involve risks. If you're playing it safe, your plan's probably not going to be as effective as you need it to be. The whole point of creating a plan is to mitigate that risk as much as possible, so that way you are working on what's most important and figuring out how to get it all done. Let's talk a little bit more about how to do that. So accelerating a plan is about keeping it simple. keeping that growth going, and really looking at what makes a good plan in place. Now, like I said, I've been involved in large, complicated planning processes, and what I found is they typically didn't work. There was a lot of research on the front end. There was a document that was handed to you. Most of the time, that document was several hundred pages in length. It actually came in a 3-ring binder, and nobody ever looked at it due to the complexity of what you had. That is why we're talking about creating a 1-page plan today, and this plan can work in any size organization. You might have to use it differently in a large organization with multiple divisions or departments, but you can still use the same concept here and create an effective working plan by just doing the simple things. And here's what we got to keep in mind when we do that. We need to stay nimble. As I said, 2020 has been kind of an upended battle for a lot of businesses to try and figure out how they keep the business growing and thriving. Some companies, this worked out in their favor. There were a lot of things that aligned for them with COVID that allowed them to continue growing. For other companies, they might have saw an initial push, but then they saw things slow down. Some companies are now seeing things starting to come back as certain states or certain communities open up. So we do have to watch that, but we have to be nimble where we can maneuver around the various outside influences that are going to change the direction that our business is going. Simplicity. I have stressed this numerous times with my clients. For whatever reason, as we tend to grow businesses, we want to make them more complex. I think it's human nature to just kind of add and duct tape things in place that make businesses seem bigger or more, more complex than they need to be. And as we look at a plan, the plan should be simple enough that any person in your organization can execute what they are responsible for. I think that's the key message here is you want to design something that's easy to communicate, that's easy to interpret, that's easy to execute, and that has measurable outcomes that people know when they're accomplishing what they're doing. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Visible. A 3-ring binder is going to sit on a shelf. Nobody's going to open it again. So that's why you ditch the 3-ring binder. You want to focus on something that can be, as this document is, a PDF document that can be right on your desktop or your iPad or wherever you put it. And it's something you can easily access and anyone has access to it because everyone in your organization has a responsibility to deliver on that plan. If everyone has it in front of them, it's much easier to communicate to, it's much easier to coach, it's much easier to follow up. It's also much easier to see what's not working and how you need to change in order to make the plan work. It has to be measurable. If we aren't measuring what we're doing, how do we know where we are going to go? And we'll talk about, there's different types of measures. So most of us are used to measuring sales and profits. Well, what about, how do you measure customer service? How do you measure when you're getting improvements in sales? And Adrienne Miller's on here. She could probably throw in a number of ideas, but you can attend her webinar in a couple weeks on that. But there are a number of different things you need to look at from a measurable side of things. There's KPIs. We look at leading indicators and lagging indicators. So we want to look at what are the actions going into what you're doing that produce the outcomes that you want, which is typically sales, profits, turnover, all those questions that, again, are after the fact. If you are spending all your time looking in the rearview mirror, i.e. looking at things that have already been completed, like sales, you're only going to get so much information out of it. You have to look at what are the actions that lead up to those sales and lead up to that sales growth. Every plan has to have accountability. If you don't have accountability in your plan, it's going to be very hard for you to get people to act on it. So many people I have seen create plans, don't assign champions or leaders to specific objectives within that plan. What that creates is everyone's working on it, which means nobody is. If you've ever had a situation, maybe in your office, for example, somebody needs to clean the break room, and it's everybody's responsibility to clean the break room. 99.9% of the time in offices I go in where it's everybody's responsibility, the break room is always the dirtiest place to go. That is because everybody expects everybody else is going to do that job. So we need accountability. We need assignments to people. They need to understand what they're doing and how they're delivering on that plan, because ultimately that's what's going to make the difference. Dynamic. As I mentioned, I don't need to stress this anymore. Your plan needs to change over time. It can't be a static document that you are just putting on a shelf and hoping is going to be accomplished. What we're going to do with this process, which is different than most other processes you see, is this plan is designed to be reviewed and updated quarterly. That means every 3 months, you are essentially reviewing your plan, you're adjusting what you're doing, and then you are re-executing that plan based on the information that you've gained over the course of the current 3 months that you are working in. It takes a little more work to do that. The benefits are, however, as you get used to this process and as everyone gets used to following the plan, you are going to see greater results from it because this becomes part of your culture, part of something you do day in and day out to make sure you're staying on track. And because it is dynamic, because you are reviewing and adjusting more often, those micro adjustments are making a difference. Or you are catching a problem that's going to be coming up that now you can pivot around. Your plan is not as static. It's not going to go obsolete because COVID hit, for example. You're going to have ways to adjust and maneuver around whatever ends up in front of you. And here's the process that we're going to work by. So first, as I describe it, is kind of like landing a plane. If you've ever been flying, which I know most of the people on here have traveled or travel quite a bit, when you're at 30,000 feet, the view is completely different. You can see a lot farther, but there's a lot less detail in what you're doing. As the plane's coming into the airport and comes closer to the ground, now you can make out things where little dots moving along the highway. Now it becomes clear that they're cars or trucks. Towns become clearer as far as what's homes, what's businesses, what's churches, etc. As you get even closer to the airport, the trees become more visible. Now it's the color of cars. Now you might even be able to tell what type of cars are on the highway. You can tell different parts of the city based on what you see when you're coming in. And then when you finally land, you can pick up the blades of the grass, the grain of the concrete on the ground. All of that becomes a lot more clear as you get closer. That's what this plan is designed to do. So there's one part of it that is going to focus on the big picture, the visioning, the values, the SWOT, that type of thing. As you get to the other side of it, it's going to focus on more of the day-to-day tasks or the quarterly tasks that need to be done to complete the plan. And this is the process. So first we work on visioning. If you haven't reviewed your vision in a while, I highly recommend you do so. Values. I stress values with every company I work with, that these are the guideposts that make your business work. It's what you will do, it's what you won't do. It defines your culture. It's what makes you unique. Part of what makes you unique outside of the people that work for you. SWOT, I'm sure everyone here has probably done a SWOT analysis at some point. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. And then we get into what are our big goals. Big goals are different than the daily goals. They might be stretch goals that you have over the course of several years, for example. Maybe you're a $1 billion company now and you want to be a $20 million company in the next 5 years. Well, the steps you take today get you closer to that goal in that 5-year window. So we're going to look at things from a very big, broad perspective, and then we need to break those down into smaller, more measurable and more actionable chunks as we go through this process. A lot of times what we also miss is we miss talent. Every organization has employees, or they have subcontractors, or they have consultants, they have other people that are helping them get to where they go. You need to identify and assess the talent that you have, and that needs to be an important part of leading into this process, is in knowing what it's going to take to get to where you want to be. And if you don't have the right people, you need to figure out how to augment that. And we'll discuss different ways you can do that as well. We got to talk about performance. As you'll discover as we go through this, I'm a car guy. Everything's going to kind of have a race theme to it. I have put explanations next to the themes that I have put down, so it should be pretty easy to translate across the board. If you have any questions, let me know. But performance is always a key. If you drive nice cars, you probably are worried about horsepower, fuel economy, things like that. All these ideals apply to your business. Horsepower is the power that your business generates. It's the power to generate sales. It's the power to get things done. It's the power to push through the work so that you can continue to grow. And we'll talk about different ways that we can apply that. Leading indicators. As I mentioned earlier, there's leading indicators and lagging indicators. We often worry about the end results. I'm going to be at 10 million by X year or X month. Well, what's it going to take to get there? What actions need to change today so that the results you can get tomorrow will actually happen? We worry about looking in the rearview mirror, and then when we don't hit those goals, we wonder why. Well, this is part of the reason. We need to know what actions are going in up front that's going to make the difference in the outcomes we're looking for later on. That then leads to objectives. Like I said, we're boiling this down. We're kind of getting into the runway now. And this is the goals that we're working on over the course of a year or less. And in most cases, it's going to be less, it's going to start out as a year and work backwards into, again, that quarterly process. And finally, the measurements. What are the things that we're tracking? What information do we need to make sure we're on target with where we're going? The basics, again, are always sales and profits, but there might be other metrics specific to your organization that's going to be completely different. And you need to understand what those key metrics are. They might be important to you. They might not be important to anyone else. It's about defining those. So first, let's talk about mission, vision, and values. And I put mission and vision on here, but values take a very important part, and they're right in the middle there. Vision is the destination. So much like my example with the airplane, if you were planning out a roadmap or planning to go somewhere, let's say, I'm in Wisconsin, I'm planning to go to Los Angeles. I pretty much know where Los Angeles is relative to me. However, I don't know the exact distance to get there. We're going to pretend I'm not looking at the internet or following MapQuest or anything like that. I don't know the exact distances to get there. I don't know the exact route I'm going to take, but I know where it is and I know where I want to go. That's basically what a vision is. Again, from a distance point of see things, you can see far away. It's not quite as clear, but you have an image of what you're trying to achieve. The mission side of things gets much closer, much more granular to what you're going to accomplish. We're going to achieve $1 million in sales by the end of 2021, for example, would be a clear mission goal that I would look at. Values are the glue that holds it all together. And the analogy I use with a lot of my clients is think of a multi-lane highway. The multi-lane highway is leading to your destination, i.e. your vision, and it allows you opportunity to maneuver between lanes as obstacles come up. For example, you have a customer that comes to your door and they are unhappy with something you're doing. Does it require senior leadership to solve the problem, or can anyone in the organization figure it out? And if you have a clear set of values and your people understand those values and what your promise is to your customers, that can make a huge difference in the outcomes that you get. In other words, it doesn't become reliant on management to make every decision. People know based on the value set and based on how the organization works, what we will do and what we won't do, how to make decisions and help create a better customer experience. If you ever need help with that, feel free to give me a call. I can explain different ways that you can implement tools to help greater engagement by your staff to solve your customer's problem without constantly having to involve management. So those are the three things we start with. As you go through this, think about what your vision is, what your values are, what your mission is, and how you would apply that to the document we're going to be working on. As you can tell, unless you already have that written out, it's probably going to take some time. SWOT analysis. As I said, everyone here has probably done one at some point. We have our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. There's many different ways to go about this, but bottom line is when I look at a SWOT analysis, I see it from an internal viewpoint and an external viewpoint. I've listed that on here. So if you look at the strengths and weaknesses, they tend to be what I would call internal issues. Strengths, what are the unique abilities, talents, skills that your company has that really no other company does or does as well as you do? How do you apply that? What's that mean to your unique selling proposition? What does that mean to how you work through or around your competitors? Weaknesses are the opposite end of that. So again, internally, what are the challenges we face that limit our strengths or limit our ability to grow? And we look at those internal measures and do our best to define what those attributes are that we need to change. Now we flip to the other side, the opportunities and threats. I view these as external. So this is looking at our environment around us. What is changing that works to our benefit, i.e. opportunities? Maybe we see an opportunity with like services in another industry that we want to capitalize. Those become opportunities. We don't have the ability necessarily to address those now, but we see those as potential revenue growth or business growth opportunities in the future. Threats. Threats, again, is everything external around you that you have limited or no control over. Do I need to say any more about this year? We have pandemic, we have unrest going on, we have an election going on, we have a lot of conflict happening in our world that we need to address, and how does that impact the work that we do? For some of you that are in construction industry, maybe things have been fine for now. Maybe things are going to be changing though in the next several months as newer projects slow down. We don't know what's going to happen, but we got to predict what we think might happen. And that's where the SWOT analysis comes in handy. We're looking internally at things we need to improve or attributes we need to improve. We're looking externally at what's happening around us and how will that impact our business both positively and negatively. From there, that's the foundation of where we start creating the plan. Now let's talk about the planning process a little bit. Going to show you the dashboard here in bits and pieces, but essentially this is looking at the first page of the document. And this is the long-term view. So everything we're looking at on that front page is really more about looking at how the business is going to operate in the next 2 to 5 years versus how it's going to operate in the next 1 to 3 months. The basics of it, just to keep track of which version you're on: record, company, the organizer, the name of the person who's putting it together, the year, and it would be good to keep track of these. It's always important to me when I'm working with a client to show them where they've been and where they're going and all the steps they've completed along the way. We often forget, though, to show progress. And if progress is incremental, not monumental, which it is for most businesses, it becomes more apparent to keep documents like these and archive them so we can go back and say, okay, 2 years from now, here's where we're at today. Where did we come from? Let's look backwards. And it's a great motivator for your current employees that have been with you along the ride. I think it's also beneficial to newer employees that have joined your organization to understand where you came from. That history becomes so important. It becomes important for a number of reasons. First of all, it gives the person an understanding, especially a new person, an understanding of what your culture is like, where you've grown from, what you've done to change. And people want to work for companies that are changing and are evolving and are going to be sustainable over a long period of time. It also allows them to see what's been done in the past and maybe how to modify those things to make improvements in the future. How many times have you said or heard, we've done that before, that didn't work? Well, just because it's been done before doesn't mean it can't be done again. Maybe the times have changed where it is time to implement that past practice or that past process that wasn't working last time, and it could have been because of people, it could have been because of timing, technology, whatever it might be. So as things change, we need to look at our history, see what's working, see what's not, modify going forward. And the best way to do that is to have an archived record of things that you've tried. Now we get to the measure portion. This is from a high level. So like I said, the plane's still flying at a pretty high altitude. We're talking about vision and values, and we're also starting to establish our long-term high-level goals. I put on here, shoot the moon, and we actually start with that. We start with what's the thing that you want to create, what's the goal you want to create, what's the organization you want to create, how does that look from your viewpoint or your perspective, getting fairly granular on what you want the outcome to be. Maybe you want to be number one in your industry. Maybe you want to own a $100 million business. Whatever that might be, this is where it would go. These are long-term stretch goals that if we do the right actions today, we might actually achieve them in the future, but they are stretch goals. We want to be clear about that. Our race, like I said, here's where we start getting into the racing theme. What is our race? What is the race that we're running? How are we competing? What is it we do and why do we do what we do? That to me is important. Understanding the why. If you've ever read Simon Sinek, start with why. This is really what I'm talking about. Most companies know what they do. Being clear on why they do it becomes much more important. Emphasizing that why. This becomes your differentiator. The clearer you can explain that why, the clearer it is to your prospects, your clients, your customers, how you become different. The guideposts, as I mentioned, these are the values we live by. They are what keeps us on the highway, keeps us from going in the ditch, but allows us maneuverability to maneuver around those obstacles that are in front of us. So we need a clear set of values explained in a way that everyone understands them the same way. Most people like to put honesty, integrity. Those things should just be assumed. I want to get deeper in how you talk about your clients, how you talk about your customers, how you talk about your employees, how you talk about your community. What are the things you're doing as an organization that really go about helping better the people that work for you, better the communities you live in? Because ultimately, all these things work together to help keep you viable and keep you growing. And we all want to be good business partners. If you're on this call, I truly believe that. We all want to be good business partners. So we should really be looking at how our value sets align with the community around us and supports them as they support us. Where the rubber meets the road, this is really getting an analysis of what do your customers expect? How do you know what they expect from you and what they're looking for? Because that becomes also a guideline for how you continue to grow. You want to know what their expectations are. You want to know how to exceed those expectations as often as possible. That's what keeps them loyal to you. And then finally, in the shaded box, we've got our drivers. And our drivers can be defined two different ways. So we can define drivers as, again, those metrics that really push our business forward. When I describe drivers here, I'm describing individuals. I'm describing people. We might not have names or titles to those people yet, but we're talking about the talent we have around us. That's where it matters. So I look at it from two sides. I look at the talent you have, the talent you need. As you review the talent you have, what are the people that are working for you doing that makes the difference in your organization? What skills or abilities do they bring, both from a technical side and from a behavioral side? That's the other thing that we often forget to look at, is we can have the best person on paper, but they can be absolutely horrid in working with others. They can be rude to our customers. They can fail in a lot of other areas. So that really gets to the behavioral side of things. What you hire on the sheet of paper, you often fire because of their attitude. We got to keep that in mind. So as we do our talent assessment, we look at not only technical skills, but we look at behavior. We also look at the talent we need. So in any organization, there's going to be gaps in talent. There's going to be skills or abilities that your organization needs to grow that maybe you can't find or are having trouble filling those positions. There's been a lot of competition over the past couple years anyway. We've had a pretty tight labor market. That might have changed a little bit with COVID, but what I have found is that a lot of the positions that aren't being filled tend to be lower skilled, lower wage positions, primarily in restaurants, hotels, travel, places like that. We're still seeing people keeping their jobs in more of the manufacturing, more of the professional skills, because a lot of those positions were a little bit more isolated from what was going on. We'll have to see what happens going forward as, again, more people may remain unemployed. We're seeing good numbers bounce back. Hopefully it continues that way. But we do have to watch what's going on and look for where those opportunities are. That means looking for that talent, seeing how you can bring that talent in. We live here in the Midwest, so there are certain obstacles or challenges we face maybe that's a little more unique than somebody that's in like New York City, for example. Higher populations, a lot more to do. If you like the hustle and bustle, you're going to gravitate towards a bigger city. Where we live here in the Midwest, towns are a lot smaller. So people do gravitate towards places like Madison or Milwaukee, but once you start getting in the outlying areas, maybe it's a little bit harder to find that help because that help wants to go where all the excitement is. we have to figure out how we market ourselves to attract that help in. And I think another thing that's really been more apparent with what we're seeing with what's been going on in 2020 is the opportunity to work with people virtually. Most of the time, that has been off the table with a lot of people I've talked with. Well, the advantage of what's happened over the past several months is a lot of companies were forced to take roles virtually and work remotely. Now, is that possible to continue going forward? Based on the data I'm seeing, you're going to see a lot more people that are going to be able to work from home. You're going to see office spaces that are shrinking. I don't think we can eliminate the office, especially for larger corporations. But if we're seeing more productivity out of employees working from home, how do we maintain that? And that's might be the shift that a lot of companies are looking at when it comes to finding the talent they need. They might be sourcing that talent through a subcontractor. They might be sourcing that talent from somebody across the United States. It's not always going to be possible, but if there's an opportunity, that could be a great way to fill those gaps that you need. Lastly, we will look at ways to track the data. And in this case, I actually call it track data. And these are the key actions. So I was talking about KPIs, leading indicators, lagging indicators. This is the information that you need to plug in on how you will succeed by the actions that you will be doing. We've defined who our ideal customer is through the SWOT analysis, through other techniques. We understand the talent that we need, where we could go to fill that talent. We now have to put together the plan of how we are going to deliver on that promise to our internal customers, our employees, and to our external customers who are the people that pay the bills. And this is a good spot to put that. So each of these are designed, again, you can fill this in online or you can fill this in through the PDF format, print it off with a nice typed up document. Trust me, you wouldn't want to read my writing anyway, so that's part of the reason why we designed it this way. But it breaks down into three simple basic categories. So we've got, again, information about the company and where it's at the timeline of this, so we can memorialize it. We've got the middle ground, which really establishes our mission, vision, values, what we're all about, what makes us unique. And then the last part of that first page is really laying out how we do business. What are those indicators going in so that we know we get the results we want coming out? And this is where we get more granular. This is actually what we're doing as far as making the document work. Everything we're laying out on that front end is going to remain more static. We might adjust it. We should definitely review it every quarter to make sure we're on track, make sure nothing's changed. Again, if we look at our environment, if we have dramatic changes happen, sometimes we do have to adjust what's on the front end. But really that is designed to be more of that high level view and require less change. We don't want to change the entire document all the time. Instead, what we want to focus on next is what's going to change each quarter. Like I had mentioned, this document is designed to be dynamic. It is designed to be something that you don't put away, you keep in front of you, you review almost daily, if not at least weekly, to make sure you're staying on track with your goals. There's a benefit to doing this. The major benefit is you have shortened the length of time that action is required. A huge challenge with the old way of planning is you typically looked at things in 12 to 24 months, what you were going to accomplish in 12 to 24 months. Well, guess what? It's January 1st and you've got your objectives laid out for the year. There's a lot of time between January 1st and December 31st, but that time whittles away rather quickly. I mean, here we are, we're in September already. It seems like the year is, in some ways, has flown by and in some ways has taken forever, but that's the challenge we have when we have a document that doesn't change. The point of doing this is we want change to happen every 12 weeks. We want to create the actions that we're going to do over that 12-week period. We want to create the metrics that we're going to track, how well we're doing. As we get towards the end of that 12-week period, we're going to work on reviewing how far we've come. We're going to make adjustments. We're going to reset, and then we're going to move forward into the next 12 weeks. And that's really where this document comes in handy and will be helpful. So similar to the front, I break it down into 3 different sections. The first section is, what are we going to be doing each quarter? What's our goal for each quarter? Everything past the first quarter, turn one, is subject to change based off the outcome of turn one. So you want to look at what you've written down. You want to review that compared to what you have coming up, and you want to see if turn two needs to be modified. And how does that affect turn three and turn four? So as I mentioned, racing themes all the way around. If we're doing one lap around the track, each turn involves one quarter of your year. Once we have that laid out, that becomes our guidepost for everything else below it. It is also something that will be modified based on the outcomes that we're getting. The basics. Gas. Everyone needs gas in the tank. Well, what's the gas that you need? Is it people? Is it time? Is it money? It's probably a combination of all three. How do we exceed our goal? How do we put more gas in the engine to make it go faster? This is where we start figuring out those points of what we need to do. If it's money, how do we get more money or more investment in? For some people, they're not afraid to go out and get investors and amp up that way. For others that are a little more cautious or want to maintain ownership of the business, it might be different. And we got to figure out different ways to do that. Brakes. If you're going to have a gas pedal, you need a brake pedal. We need to understand where we need to put on the brakes, or what risks we face where we need to really be aware of what's going to be happening, especially in the next 3 months, that could impact the outcomes of where we're trying to go. Being very clear that we're observing those risks, it doesn't mean we're ignoring or we are stopping because of those risks. We just need to have them in front of us, and we have to watch for them so that way as we move forward, we're able to make the changes happen. Caution flags. These are the actions that cause us to pivot direction. For many of us, March was a major caution flag. Businesses are suddenly forced to shut down for upwards of several weeks to several months, and we have to figure out how we shift our business from what we were doing to what we need to do now, and how that shifts our normal, at least for the short period of time, maybe for the long period of time. I believe there's a lot of companies out there that figured out better ways of doing things because they were forced into this change. And while a lot of this has been negative, we also, as business owners, need to look at the positives that have come out of it. It might have led to cost savings for you. It might have led to business increases for you, maybe sales increases because there were certain parts of your market that opened up. Maybe it led to new opportunities. So in the past, we didn't have the time to look at these things because we were so busy doing something else. Well, now we've had a pause. We've had a chance to kind of reflect on that. Maybe what we did was we spent a few weeks and figured out a way to come out of it stronger. That's always important to happen. That's why we need to watch for these caution flags. This information on here can change again each time you review it to some degree. If new caution flags pop up, new risks pop up, we should be adding to that as we go along. It's very rare that you're going to figure out everything all at once, but this is, again, an opportunity to document and an opportunity to follow along and see where we're moving the needle and what needs to change. As I mentioned, there needs to be accountability. This is the who and the what. So who owns what is happening? Who owns the actions that are taking place? Every goal needs a champion. Every objective needs a champion. That champion might then break that project down where there's smaller processes that need to be dealt with, or smaller objectives that need to be worked on. But ultimately, there needs to be somebody to report to for that particular action. Who's that going to be? Is that going to be the president of the company? Is it going to be senior management team? Is it going to be shift workers? We can determine what that is based on, again, what the goal is you're working towards. But ultimately, we need a go-to person that we can talk to and make sure that whoever's working on that is making sure progress is being made. And that's the importance of having the actions. We also need a deadline. For those of you who have worked with me for a long time, we've talked a lot about goals. We've talked about SMART goals and how everything needs to be specific, measurable, attainable, and realistic as far as getting it done. So I put on here, when is it due and when is it completed? And there's reasons for doing that. When is it due? Well, at least we have a drop dead date when it needs to be completed by. When is it completed? Did we hit our target? Did we fall ahead of our target? In other words, did we get it done early? Hey, let's celebrate that. If we got it done late or we didn't finish it, we also need to track that too. And then we need to record why didn't we get it done. And the last part of it is really the time piece of it, which is the measurables, in this case, all the things that go into measuring your output. This is where we've got the qualifying, the boost, the target sales, the target profits, the receivables, the payables, and anything else you want to record. So this last part becomes very important for, again, that rear view mirror look at what's going on. Tracking goals or tracking the financial goals, tracking the operational goals on a quarterly basis. The more emphasis you put on something, the more likely that process will improve or that outcome will be accomplished. So many times I've heard people want to increase their sales, but they do nothing to change their sales process, nor do they measure if anything's actually improved. Same goes with customer service, customer experience. Same goes with production processes. What are we doing to track? What are we doing to grow? What are we doing to improve? Everyone doing good there? I've been talking a lot. I'm getting dry mouth here. So as we start to wrap this up, what you measure changes. That's where all this matters. What you measure changes, and this is why the second half of the document to me is just as important or even more important than the first half, because that's really about where we measure the results that we're getting, how we track that information. And the important part of this is the document is never done. The document is an extension, is another chapter to the book that you're writing. So we build the document, we create the plan, we then go about implementing that plan, and then we review the plan, and then the process repeats itself. Like I said, I'm looking at this in 12-week increments. So for 3 months, we work on spending some time creating the plan up front. We spend a bulk of the time over that 3 months working on implementing the plan. And then as we get towards the end, it's that time for reflection and review. We want to make sure we understand what we accomplished, what got done, what didn't, what needs to change, where we're going from there. And then that's the reset. We hit the button, we create the plan for the next time, and we repeat the process all over again. That in turn covers all of this. Getting a little windy here. We've been about 50 minutes into it, so I hope I've given you a lot of information. I also want to help you out. So if you are part of this webinar, I'm going to post in the chat a link for you. And if you need help, you can get a complimentary 30 minutes for me to review your plan with you. And I'm going to post that link up in the chat, as I mentioned. Hang on just a second. And here we go. I think, yep, there it is. So the link that's in the chat will take you to my Book Like a Boss page, where you can access my my calendar. You can schedule a meeting with me. Here's what I recommend. So you've taken notes, hopefully, on this. Print off a plan, fill it out. Once you get everything, send it to me ahead of time. Go book a time for us to meet. Allow me time to review the plan, and then I will review it with you and talk about some things I see, some changes you might want to make, or, you know, if you're doing well, how you actually implement that plan. No charge at all. Just love to see what you're doing and see that you actually work on it. I also would love to share with you that we have some upcoming webinars. And I'll get to the questions here in just a minute, but we've got more people coming along. So there's a few great people that are going to speak about things other than what I've talked about here today. So we've got Joey Guido, who's going to talk about online marketing in tough times. He's got a lot of experience in web design and SEO, and he can help you understand better what you need to do there. Adrienne Miller, and she's on the call here. Adrienne, she is a sales whiz, sales expert. And she will talk about best practices for sales success, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And finally, Kim Liebers, she is going to talk about our top tips to get people talking about you. So she's a branding expert, and her and Joey are good bookends for this. So Joey can talk about what you need to set up front. Kim can talk about how you need to look, color, feel, how you actually get that culture, that stuff that makes you unique out on paper and get noticed. So these are the things that are the webinars we need to look forward to in the coming weeks. All right, so questions. Let me kind of scroll through here. What questions do we have? All right, mentioned accountability. If you're a solopreneur, who do you suggest then? That is a wonderful question. And that's probably the hardest situation to answer, right? Because we kind of report to ourselves, we kind of do everything. And this is something that I would recommend outsourcing. Now, the shameless plug would be hire a coach. That would be the easy one. But maybe you don't have the money or you don't have the resources to hire a coach right now. I would recommend, do you have a business partner, a peer, complementary business that you trust that owner, and work out a relationship maybe where you trade. You both set goals as accountability partners, and the responsibility is to follow up with each other. That's the simplest thing you can do as a solopreneur. They're pretty hard or pretty easy to find if you are active in your community or active online. Jessica, I know you know a lot of people, so you just have to find that trusted partner who's going to hold you accountable, hold your feet to the fire, and who you would do the same thing for them. And what you can do is rising tide raises all ships, so that will create more of a level playing field for both of you and allow you to get a lot of those goals accomplished. But it's always important, again, to have that accountability piece in. So thank you for doing that. Some other things to look at, maybe probably less so, but like SCORE, your small business association, they're free services provided by the government. Now, the challenge with anything that's provided free is that you see a lot of people, unless they built a connection with you, they're just going to answer your questions and do some of the basics. So always look for somebody that's more vested in your success, and usually that's friends and colleagues that appreciate what you do. Very good. Kim, you're on here. Hey, welcome aboard. So Kim, I'm Kim's accountability partner. And I also want to thank Kim because she's done a lot of work in helping put together the design for this webinar. So thank you for that. As always, it's appreciated. All right. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. Again, if there are any questions that didn't pop up here, please let me know. This is all my contact information. You can mail me something. Thank you cards of money are always wonderful. You can also send or you can make a call. You can definitely go to my webpage, or you can email me as well. And thank you all for taking the time to attend. Give me probably till the end of this week, and I hope to have this recording up and published. And that way you guys will be able to review it at your leisure. So